My name is Elmo Pinard. I'm the Managing Director at Pastoral Care and Narrative Therapy Training Center. We have recently had our last formal information evening session for studying Pastoral Narrative Therapy as first years in 2022, this year. And I will be giving you a short introduction before we go and join that evening that we had. So this program is about pastoral and narrative therapy. And you know what? We find that we have students who are doing this program for many different reasons. Of course, if you want to become a counselor, you can do that. There's 3 disciplines normally in which you can do counseling or become a counselor. One is obviously that we know is psychology. The other route that people sometimes take is the social work route, but our route is the pastoral theology route, the route that most incorporates, compared to the other disciplines, our stories of faith and our relationship with God. So what we do is we combine this thing that we know is the same all over the world, narrative therapy, but we combine that with what we hold dear in terms of our faith. This program, therefore, also would like to invite you on this journey, even if you just do this for personal development. In fact, we've got a number of students who enroll in this program because they want to go deeper into their relationship with God, and they want to use the material that we are reading, the conversations in class, to deepen the understanding of God's story with them in their lives. So that's their personal journey, it's a transformation journey, and in so doing, obviously, that has an effect in our entire life, and it spills over in our relationships and at work and so on. Other people that don't necessarily want to become counselors, they are also not necessarily looking at personal development, although that's certainly part of, I think, all of the reasons that we encounter, but they do it they just want to be better equipped in the role that they are currently having. So they might be teachers, they might be doctors, they might be hairdressers. It doesn't really matter, but they work with people in their lives. So as a manager, as a teacher, even as a parent or a grandparent, you work with people in your life. And so this program equips you to do that better. So maybe you're part of an organization, and during COVID, you've noticed how people really suffer and try to find meaning in life, and suffer from many different things that they claim to their lives that want to take them from a place of joy and happiness, and and so that's one of the reasons, therefore, is that you are looking to help that person, or maybe you are part of a church, a ministry team, and you want to help people. So you don't necessarily think that you're going to become a formal counselor, but those are the reasons that you just want to be equipped in the kingdom of God, or wherever you are, to better be of help in God's great story. So during the 2 years, we have various subjects, modules, and during the first year, we cover pastoral and narrative subject matter. So, and that sort of takes turns. We start off with narrative therapy for, I think it's the first 8 weeks or 9-10 weeks. And then we cross over to pastoral subject matter, and then we go back to narrative therapy, and then we go back to pastoral subject matter. And of course, the material changes, but the conversation is so much richer every time that you return to those 2 subjects. And during this first year, you will encounter many contexts in which pastoral narrative therapy is applied. And this will come from the examples in the literature or in the conversations that you're having in class. But it's only in the second year that we actually focus on the different subjects. Now, we normally have 6 subjects. They range from depression, anxiety, to working with couples, to trauma, loss, grief. So I'm just mentioning a couple. You can find that on our website also. But it's important for us to bring these subjects in conversation with our stories of faith and our understanding of narrative therapy and what that is about. So someone also asked about psychology. Is it informed by psychology? It's informed by good sciences, social sciences in terms of psychology, social work, the pastoral theological discipline itself. I think if you go and look at narrative psychology, you will find many things. If you look at narrative community work, you will find many things. So it's actually just a combination, but it's important for us to have the conversation between the subject matter, the topic, and the pastoral subject matter, and the narrative therapy specific methodology that we are after. All right, so we start during the week of the 7th of February, and at this stage it looks like we're having 3 classes. You attend one of them, and it's a 3-hour class, in person, either or online. So the online class is going to be Wednesday evening from 6 o'clock till 9, and then you can also attend in person, and that's on a Monday morning if it's a morning class, or you can attend on a Tuesday evening here at our premises in Doringkloof, or the Hoovers, and it's in Leone Street 143 Leone Street. Of course, there are other learning communities across the country. We don't have formal campuses necessarily across the country. We have formal learning communities in Durbanville, in some in Bloemfontein, and you won't be attending physical class there. You'll then join us online. But we've had interesting situations. We've had people attending from Bloemfontein, and on a weekly basis they then join from Bloemfontein, but in this person's lounge or living room, and they have their coffee and they have their conversation. It's almost like a home group or a cell group, if you will, but just based on the material that we will be teaching, and they then join us online. So this becomes the process for them in that intimate group. So wherever you are, you can do it in this way. If there are more than one person in your community, then you can join up and you can attend online. We do have, however, local communities in Constantia-Crane, and as well as in Mossel Bay specifically, and they have the ability to work a little bit differently with some of the material, although not the core material or the primary material, and they have their own administrative processes as well. But it's the same in, I would say, 99% of the cases, in terms of the literature, in terms of what you will be taught in terms of pastoral narrative therapy subject matter. That's all that I want to say before we cross over. You are of course more than welcome to come and pay us a visit. You can come and drink coffee. I'm here often, but just give me a call and then we can have coffee here at the center or even online. And yeah, so it's a wonderful privilege to be hosting it this year, also from the first time from this area, which is the Doringkloof area. We've been 20 years, we've been in Waterkloof Glen. So let's go over and join the information session that we had recently. So there is a way for you to go back to the material here, even if it's just the audio, we can do that. But we want people to really attend the classes, online or in person. And we'll get to know each other, and also because we do some group work. After a while, we unpack tassies, suitcases, we call it suitcases. And you know that it's a metaphor, like if you go on holiday, or you pack stuff that you sometimes don't need, and you can unpack it, and repackage it, and decide what is worthwhile to keep for our hopes, dreams, aspirations. And Fora will say something about that. But that's part of your practice as well. That's part of getting to know the community and connecting relationally with people. I would say it's like a cell group, but you will find, like these cell groups or home groups, that these people around that you're seeing now online and here, they will really become your comrades, and it remains a space of keeping inside. You know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Right? So that's what it's about. Okay, so that's. And in terms of the practice, we also, so that's the group work. We have I think it's from week 8, 9, 10, we have an exercise in motivational interviewing, fully motivational interviewing, but it's just a basic idea and life story development. So the idea is to have conversations with people about their life and about their stories. It's not counseling per se, but that will get you into that idea of listening for something, listening for a story, listening for meaning in a non-judgmental way, listening people into the grace of God, so to speak. So that's also part of practice, but that's not for a monk as such. Okay. Porter, do you want to come here and say something about the tassies and the whole first journey? I'm specifically asking you first because we're going to be very big chunk of the first lecture.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, it's a privilege to join those people, to hear their stories, to respect their stories, and to learn from other people. So we all live in stories, and the stories is the instruments with which we make meaning. And people come to therapy or come to classes with their stories and how they make meaning. Sometimes a meaning that wasn't on their side, but was actually a detrimental conclusion about their own life. But it's our challenge to re-author our own stories and to audit it. And to create stories that is meaningful for us, and to make life meaningful and exciting. I'm privileged to start with you, so we will be here on Tuesday. And it's important for me that we really connect with each other, and we refer to that. So when we start on Tuesday, we will, and the online group is Monday, so we will try to do that online as well. To introduce ourselves, and to share something of who we are, and we can participate and become a fellowship group, which is community. So, the one activity that I will refer to is the unpacking of a suitcase. It is an opportunity for us to share our own stories and to listen to somebody else's story. So unpacking the suitcase is to invite you to bring a suitcase or a bag or anything with one or two or three items that is important in your life. It might be a cooking book, it might be an album, it can be the Bible, it can be a picture of your parents or anybody. And then we interview you. And one student will interview and you will respond, and the rest will be what we call outsider witnesses or compassionate witnesses that will listen to the story and reflect on what they hear. And in this reflection, actually contribute to make the story enriching. And that's really exciting. And then there's an assignment that's my responsibility, the one on power discourses. The audit. Sometimes I say to me that it almost victims of certain discourses or opinions about ourselves. The one that I often use is, I'm not good enough. That's a power discourse. Somewhere along the way, you made the conclusion, I'm not good enough. In what ways does not good enough actually describe your life thinly? In what ways can we discover other descriptions of your life other than just not good enough? That's really exciting. And that's why it's for me important that we join the classes. It's where we share and where we actually create new stories. And then anything else you want to do. That's okay. Thank you.
Gordon, do you want to ask?
No, I said thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. And the wonderful thing about stories is there's stories about everything, anything and everything. So we work with there's stories about the things that we bring to this space, but there is stories about your identity, stories about faith, obviously, story about your work, story about, let's go even to the coaching, to performance, to appraisals. There's stories about everything. If there's a story, you will be able to work with it. Because you are a narrative practitioner and you unpack the stories and ask about the meaning and how to proceed from it. All right, so I see that there's a lot of comments in the chat room in terms of the function. Benoni, there was still from Namibia. You can also see there on the screen. It says that the sound is not good. We have some interference from outside. I'll try to speak a little bit louder. Okay, that is okay. And we're also recording, so if you're missing something, you can have a listen. We'll send the link to them in any case. Right.
So on the assignments, let me just say that the assignments is on faith, on power discourses, and then 3 of the 6 topics during your second year. Okay, so you don't have to do all of them. It's only 3 of those topics. So maybe you can sort of focus or specialize in one of those.
In other words, 2 in the first year.
2 in your first year. Allocated to your first year. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you don't need to start too early. But also want to say start very early. The reason for that is we know that you don't have to be anxious about it. Let me use different than you don't have to be anxious about it. But we know that students will push the envelope a little way always. So we are going to have to be strict about certain things in terms of when the assignments have to be in. Our capacity has dimmed somewhat, so Lizelle took up a different position at the CMR. She's been for a very long time a pillar in terms of the operations and the specific program. Linda is going to help me with that. Linda, just say hi. So there's Linda. And she will do all the administration, the connecting with the students in terms of what you need, in terms of schedules and all of that. So while I'm mentioning schedules, so we start in the week of the 7th of February. So there's 2 weeks still. And now, Linda, you must help me remember now. So we have the online group, which is going to be Monday evenings. We have a Tuesday morning group, and we have a Wednesday evening group. Tuesday morning is here, Wednesday evening is also here. And then we have an fully online group. But the lectures can be here. They can be wherever they need to be for us. Our morning group at this stage is a little bit low in terms of the amount of students we have. We are aiming for at least 15 students in a group. And with many things, moving here, COVID and so on. So that group we are watching it. So who's attending the morning? We can just get a sense of who's attending. So especially you guys, I want you to spread the word, because what happens if we don't have enough students is we have to sort of evaluate, but what will likely happen is that we sponsor from the larger groups, the smaller groups, but it cannot go too low. But we have enough, but we need more for that morning group. We've always had a morning group also. We've always had an evening group. And the online group came with. The nice thing about smaller groups, obviously, is it's more intimate. And this is the space. Okay. So it's not bad. I think it's beneficial in that sense. I know that Fora likes it like that. Okay. Online also, online is very interactive. So we want people to engage online and ask questions, and we use the groups online. And so we try everything at our disposal. We use that to teach and to train. And we've also had the interesting situations in other places in the country where people convene at someone's lounge room. And I remember it was Annelies Koen in Bloemfontein. So she and 3 or 4 people came together in a lounge, living room, and then they listened on the screen and interacted like that. That's wonderful, actually. And it becomes a home style in that sense. So when you're then asked to discuss something, you will go and make coffee, and you can talk to your colleagues in the lounge, like that. Colleagues, am I missing something before I make the floor open for questions? So there is a way for you to go back to the material, even if it's just the audio, we can do that. But we want people to really attend the classes, online or in person. And we'll get to know each other, and also because we do some group work. After a while, we unpack tassies, suitcases, we call it suitcases. And that it's a metaphor, like if you go on holiday, or you pack stuff that you sometimes don't need, and you can unpack it, repackage it, and decide what is worthwhile to keep for our hopes, dreams, aspirations. And Fora will say something about that. But that's part of your practice as well. That's part of getting to know the community and connecting relationally with people. I would say it's like a cell group, but you will find, like many cell groups or home groups, that these people around that you're seeing now online and here, they will really become your comrades, and it remains a space of of keeping inside, you know, but what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? So that's what it's about. Okay, so that's, and in terms of the practice, we also, so that's the group work. We have from, I think it's from week 8, 9, 10, we have an exercise in motivational interviewing, we call it motivational interviewing, but it's just a basic idea and life story development. So the idea is to have conversations with people about their life and about their stories. We don't, it's not counseling per se, but that will get you into that idea of, you know, listening for something, listening for a story, listening for meaning in a non-judgmental way, listening people into the grace of God, so to speak. So that's also part of practice, but you don't, that's not for a mark as such. Okay. Porter, do you want to come here and say something about the Tussies and the whole first journey? People, I'm specifically asking you first because we're going to be a very big chunk of first lecturers.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, it's a privilege to journey with people, to hear their stories, to respect their stories, and to learn from other people. So we all live in stories, and the stories is the instruments with which we make meaning. And people come to therapy or come to classes with their stories and how they make meaning. Sometimes a meaning that wasn't on their side, what was actually a detrimental conclusion about their own life. But it's our challenge to audit, to re-author our own stories and to audit it. And to create stories that is meaningful for us, and to make life meaningful and exciting. I'm privileged to start with you, so you'll be here on Tuesday. And it's important for me that we really connect with each other, and we refer to that. So when we start on Tuesday, we will, and the online group is Monday, so we will try to do that online as well. To introduce ourselves, and to share something of who we are, and we can participate and become a fellowship group, which is community. So, the one activity that I will refer to is the unpacking of a suitcase. It is an opportunity for us to share our own stories and to listen to somebody else's story. So unpacking the suitcase is to invite you to bring a suitcase or a bag or anything with 1 or 2 or 3 items that is important in your life. It might be a cooking book, it might be an album, it can be the Bible, it can be a picture of your parents or anybody. And then we interview you. And one student will interview and you will respond, and the rest will be what we call outsider witnesses or compassionate witnesses that will listen to the story and reflect on what they hear. And in this reflection, actually contribute to make the story enriching. And that's very exciting. And then there's the assignment that's my responsibility, the one on power discourses. The all, sometimes I say to me that it becomes victims of certain discourses or opinions about ourselves. The one that I often use is, I'm not good enough. That's a power discourse. Somewhere along the way, you made the conclusion, I'm not good enough. In what ways does not good enough actually describe your life thinly? In what ways can we discover other descriptions of your life other than just not good enough? That's really exciting. And that's why it's for me important that we join the classes. It's where we share and where we actually create new stories. And that's everything else you want to do.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Lauren, do you want to ask?
No, I said thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. And the wonderful thing about stories is there's stories about everything, anything and everything. So we work with that. There's stories about the things that we bring to this space, but there is stories about your identity, stories about your faith, obviously, story about your work, story about, let's go even to the coaching, to performance, to appraisals. There's stories about everything. If there's a story, you will be able to work with it because you are a narrative practitioner and you unpack the stories and ask about the meaning and how to proceed from it. So on the assignments, let me just say that the assignments is on faith, on power discourses, and then 3 of the 6 topics during your second year. Okay, so you don't have to do all of them. It's only 3 of those topics. So maybe you can sort of focus or specialize in one of those.
In other words, 2 in the first year.
2 in your first year. Allocated to your first year. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you don't need to start too early. But I also want to say start very early. The reason for that is we know that you don't have to be anxious about it. Let me use different than you don't have to be anxious about it. But we know that students will push the envelope a little way always. So we are going to have to be strict about certain things in terms of when the assignments have to be in. So while I'm mentioning schedules, so we start in the week of the 7th of February. So there's 2 weeks still. And now, Linda, you must help me remember now. So we have the online group, which is going to be Monday evenings. We have a Tuesday morning group, and we have a Wednesday evening group. Tuesday morning is here. Wednesday evening is also here. And then we have an fully online group. But the lectures can be here. They can be wherever they need to be for us. Our morning group at this stage is a little bit low in terms of the number of students we have. We are aiming for at least 15 students in a group. And with many things, moving here, COVID and so on. So that group we are watching it. So who's attending the morning? We just get a sense of who's attending. So especially you guys, I want you to spread the word. Because what happens if we don't have enough students is we have to sort of evaluate, but what will likely happen is that we sponsor from the larger groups, the smaller groups, but it cannot go too low. But we have enough, but we need more for that morning group. We've always had a morning group also. We've always had an evening group and the online group came with. The nice thing about smaller groups obviously is it's more intimate. And this is the space. So it's not bad. I think it's beneficial in that sense. I know that Fora likes it like that. Okay. Online also, online is very interactive. So we want people to engage online and ask questions, and we use the groups online. And so we try everything at our disposal. We use that to teach and to train. And we've also had the interesting situations in other places in the country where people convene at someone's lounge room. And I remember it was Annelies Koen in Bloemfontein. So she and 3 or 4 people came together in a lounge, living room, and then they listened on the screen and interacted like that. That's wonderful, actually. And it becomes a home style in that sense. So when you are then asked to discuss something, you will go and make coffee and you can talk to your colleagues in the lounge, like that. Colleagues, am I missing something before I make the floor open for questions? Not from your side. Linda, was it on me? But in terms of the finances, you guys know that by the end of Jan, with the program starting, there's a deposit of 1,770 rand. Linda will also help you with the finances. Okay. So that needs to be paid, and then ideally, we want sort of payments, monthly payments up until the end of October. But you can have any kind of arrangement that there is to be made. You can do that with Linda, and then continuing during the second year also, so that by the end of next year, October, we finalize the payment if there is a payment. But if you are experiencing challenges, then you must also speak to us. So as a small organization, we don't really have bursaries, like in the traditional sense of bursaries, but we know sometimes students struggle, and then the community can then club in, and we can, sell boerewors and do all kinds of things. Also, the nice thing again about being a non-profit, a training non-profit, and a public benefit organization is that people can sponsor you. Organizations can sponsor you, and they will be able to obtain from us an Article 18A receipt that they can show to SARS, and that will be deducted from their taxes. So that's an amazing thing that many people don't know about. So if I sponsor someone, so I give 5,000 Rand, and then good evening, you're welcome. So then if I do that, then along with my tax submission, I'm just going to say, I've sponsored this, and Pastoral Narrative is going to give you that tax receipt, and that gets deducted, and on what remains, obviously, that you get taxed. So for many organizations, that's a really great instrument for them. And since they have to in any way, make contributions towards social development, why would you not do it? If you do good in the world by sponsoring someone like you who's going to work in a school or in a business environment, or as a hairdresser, or as a parent even. So that's the kind of good that we want to see happening in the world. You are effectively the hands and the feet of the story of God. And so if we get those sponsorships, and that's good for everyone. All right, questions. Let's see what we can do with questions. Any questions? Yes.
With the books and everything, you mentioned about the links. The links, does that contain the course material, or okay, so you don't have to purchase the hard copy of the book?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
So we'll set you up with a link to, and we don't provide all the links in advance. So we for that model. So the 2 years are constructed in the model, like narrative pastoral, and the topics for the second year. So we give you the chunk of that, let's say that module, and you can download it, and then you have it, you have access to it.
So the deposit we pay, my wife's also doing the course with me. She's just a bit sick. So should we deduct it from the first month's out?
It is actually the first month.
Really?
Yes, so
Because we paid a deposit end of last year to register.
that should have been 300 or 400 Rand.
That's correct.
Yes, and then you deduct that from the 1770, and that's the difference, the 134 that you would think paid by the end of January.
Perfect. The other question I have is, we surely plan to do the third year. So that is our journey in our lives. So I would love to have a discussion with you maybe.
Just talk to me and actually,
on
Mark,
that.
you can just get onto the same Zoom link tomorrow evening. Session.
Is it? Thank you.
You're welcome to just.
Thanks.
So you can find Pastoral Narrative on that number, 012-998-9083. But it's also available on the website. You Google it, because someone was asking, so I'm just putting it out there. And you can then speak to Linda, wherever she is, whether she's here or at home, since we're working in a sort of hybrid environment, you'll be able to reach Linda through the main office numbers. Yeah. On the finances, just one more thing. So what happens is that small sort of rather registration application fee of 300-400 Rand adds up to your 1770, which becomes your deposit. And that is actually already part of your cost of tuition. So the payment in the next month, covers the remaining balance of that year. So it's not something additional. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. More questions? Give it to you. Can I ask maybe, what denominations do you guys represent?
We become Vineyard, Christian Centurion Vineyard.
All right.
Rental, off rental,
We didn't yet.
off rental.
Okay.
In here. Where in here? Around here, in here.
Yeah,
Limerick.
Yeah.
Okay.
from New Covenant Ministries International, we're in Sandton.
Okay. Okay, can I start?
I'm from Volker Baptist,
You're Baptist.
but I grew up Methodist.
Ek was NG deur in Kloof en toe Doksa. Ja, my kinders is almal by NG deur in Kloof.
So you travel a bit.
Ja, almal.
Yeah, we all travel.
So,
It's not like
was
the
like
old
the
days.
baby.
Remember the old days where you had to go to that particular school or that particular church, everything like that. Different time there. I initially studied theology. I was a minister at a nearby church in Peer van Reineveld, Peer van Reineveld Community Church, it's a Dutch church. I then went on to the lecture at the university and the researcher at the university in the Faculty of Theology. And I'm at this stage also still a research fellow at some of the other faculties in our country, theological faculties. So I'm not a Germany anymore. And as sort of expressions of faith goes, Peer van Reineveld is sort of going to the way of, let's say, Doxa, in terms of the experience of the music and that kind of thing. Okay. But what I really want to say is that Kurumdayo is not denomination. So we're not going to pressure you in any kind of thinking that you have to believe like this, believe like that. And in fact, that's one of the things that we want you to understand as you grow in your understanding, that people, they are positioning themselves to. And so what if you are speaking with someone who's not of the same denomination, or even of the same faith? We've had some people of representing other different religions. We had a Hindu lady, we had a Jew. So that makes for really interesting conversations in class. But we don't want to be judgmental. We believe what we believe, but as in terms of the specifics, the dogma, we're not going to say you have to do this, you have to do that. In fact, I think narrative therapy is a wonderful container for your faith story and the meaning that you give. And we can speak at length about that story in our classes also. How does that sound? Were you concerned about it? No, but you have questions about that. There is an element of psychology, but it's embedded in the narrative approach and embedded in the pastoral approach. So for me, I have a big interest in how the disciplines come together. And there's 3 disciplines predominantly that works with counseling. It's the theological one, specifically the pastoral theological discipline. Then psychology, obviously, and the other one is social work. Narrative therapy developed in a way from social work because it's got a more community focus, but people obviously use it in individual settings as well, because we think that in the narrative paradigm that when a person sits in front of me or we have coffee together, they are part of a network of connectedness. They're part of a community, and there's always influence, always. So that's where the community aspect comes in. You can also work in a community setting. So answering this question, so there's psychology, especially for Mossel. Mossel, if you go and look up narrative psychology or even narrative theology, we will read a number of things that will answer your question in that respect. Psychology was a little bit late in terms of adopting narrative therapy. The psychological model is often historically more of sort of like a medical model that used to diagnose. They don't necessarily do that anymore. But we don't want to diagnose. We don't want to put labels on people, attach names to things. Well, we do attach names to things, but that's part of externalization. In terms of the formal descriptions, we would rather say there's a relationship that someone has with depression, rather than saying you are depressed. Because people internalize it so much, and we think that if we externalize certain things in our lives, then it becomes more hopeful, more possible to do something about the relationship, whether it's abuse, whether it's whatever, alcohol, there's a relationship. So those are the three main disciplines. Fine. Then the community setting, you can use this in any kind of community setting. You can use it as a consultant. People have been appointed as pastoral counselors in schools also. There's also an organization, Project Schools in George, and probably all over the country, who places youth workers, having gone through training in a narrative and in other ways as well, but in a narrative pastoral way. Then most people, I think, go the private practice route. The least known of the helping professions is possibly the pastoral counseling profession. And I'm saying, referring to it outside of the ministry environment. So you can be very useful in an organizational setting, in the employee assistance setting, from a pastoral and narrative perspective. So there's no area in which you cannot apply. If there's a story, you want to work with the story of an organization, the story of a team, the story of a family, the story of individuals, couples, you can apply that in those settings. So I'm saying that it's the least known, and for that reason, sometimes we have to do a bit of explaining. So in the end, if you go the counseling route, you have the decision to make. Am I only going to refer myself as a counselor or a narrative counselor? In this sense, I use counselor and therapist as the same narrative way. Or are you going to say that you're a pastoral counselor or pastoral narrative counselor? It does matter to people. If you put yourself out there specifically as a pastoral narrative counselor, then there's more scope for you to have conversations related to faith and spirituality. It's not to say that it's not there in other ways, but it's easier because people sort of come to you for that. Other people find that they want to keep it open and they just say that they are narrative counselors or narrative therapists, but obviously they are Christians, and however God leads them in that journey, being trained, you can have those conversations. There's nothing that says that you have to call yourself a pastoral narrative therapist, but that is what you are being trained to do. You just want to say I'm a counselor, then you're a counselor. Or I'm a narrative practitioner, then you don't have to be a counselor. I've tried narrative work on my kids, and it works from a very small age, but I think that's one of the most typical contexts in which to sort of apply narrative ideas.
Okay, so after the 2 years, we are practitioners, narrative practitioners. If we do the 3rd year, then we are counselors. That's the route we want to take.
Yeah.
Is it?
About the 3rd year, though, we have our information in tomorrow night. So if you know ministers or other people in ministry, that the 3rd year is not aimed at teaching you the narrative or the pastoral ideas as much as it creates the journey from a pastoral and narrative perspective. And I'm saying this because anyone can really attend that as well. As long as you understand that the training takes place in the first 2 years, but if I'm a business person, there's a lot that I can learn from the transformational process in the 3rd year. Even if you're a social worker or a psychologist, you can also do that. And then attached to that program, there are a certain amount of hours that become as practitioner hours. So whether you are in business or whether you're a psychologist, you're going to have conversations with people. That's part of that journey. But after the 2 years, you can register already as a counselor. But it's important, like let's say, beginning of the 2nd year, to have that conversation with yourself and God again in terms of where do you want to go with this? Because the sooner you realize that you want to go into counseling, the sooner you're going to be in that state of mind of wanting to figure out how do I apply this. We do all of it, but you know that saying that what that says, the student appears, the teacher will appear when the student is ready. You know that. It's a wonderful saying. The teacher will appear when the student is ready. And so if you are a student studying towards this, or it's a personal development journey, then the teacher in terms of that appears. But if you are studying specifically to become a counselor, then there's something else going on in your mind. So you can register then after the 2 years.
Okay, with which professional board will that be?
That is with the Council for Spiritual and Pastoral Counsel. So, yeah, so the pastoral, that's the most formal pastoral counseling association that is most recognized by the government in the country. And obviously now other disciplines have other governing bodies, so to speak. So the social workers have theirs, the psychologists have theirs, HCPA, for instance.
Can I say something on that?
Yeah.
I'm on that board. It really gives you get a practice number and stuff like that. We don't know what your qualification is. But it's really nice that I went to visit a friend of mine in the hospital, and because you get a card and all that like that, and even her husband wasn't able to go and visit her. But because you are part of this body, people recognize that. And that gives, for example, that gave me an interest to go and visit her while her husband wasn't even allowed to visit me.
I also saw that it is accredited with the University of Pretoria. Can you further your studies through them, or how does?
Yes. Thank you for asking. You don't have to say sorry because you're helping everyone. They'll say, why didn't I ask that? I also want to know that. Okay, so yes, it's accredited by the University of Pretoria. We have been a lecture for some time, so I know how exactly this fits into that system of theirs. And so what happens is after the 2 years, you will get recognition if you study there's a postgraduate diploma that you can study, and then that can lead to a master's, and that can then obviously lead to a doctorate degree in this theological line of counseling and theology. But it's also very important that they have certain criteria. So it's not a given. It's like the psychologists have like a permission. There's always some kind of permission. But largely they are looking at whether for people having to have like any kind of a bachelor's degree. So I don't know what your prior other training might be if you have other training. Any one of you have like a bachelor's degree in something, anything? Okay, or other kinds of theological training. So we have, it's not a clear answer in that sense because they actually want any kind of third year degree or a bachelor's degree. And then in that sense, the 2 years that you did with Gromday is going to give you credit for at least 4 of the 6 subjects. Because the postgraduate diploma at UP is kind of expensive. So that always makes me feel better about our program. Compared to a university, that's really definitely not expensive. So, and then that is just very theological, that specific course. Because remember, that's a postgraduate diploma. And that leads into a master's degree. Okay. So their idea here, and I'm speaking from the inside, having been there, is people come from the outside, not knowing something about theology. And so they go through a broad exposure to all of the subjects in theology. But we are also doing it. So that's why you're getting credits for 4 of the 6 subjects. We just do it in a counseling setting, which they don't do. So that's more theological. After that, in a master's program, then you can focus on basically any topic. And so my PhD was at the University of Pretoria, and their formal degree there is called Pastoral Family Therapy. And it's narrative, it's pastoral narrative.
If you can read the first 2 chapters of Morgan for our first meeting, that will help. So please have a video. The first 2 chapters of Morgan.
No. With the easy someone asked, aside from accreditation, what is then the main difference between the short course offered and versus the 2 year, with the option then to add a 3rd year? We don't necessarily have a short course each year. We decide a little bit later whether we are in fact going to do a short course and what is the content of the short course. The short course content is actually the narrative therapy from Alice Morgan. So that's predominantly the context. But we don't have the luxury in the short course to at length cover what you guys are going to be doing in the program. So that's why it's really beneficial to start with a program in this way, as opposed to waiting to see if we have a short course. I think we might have one. But and then that will also serve as a bridging course into the longer program. And at that stage, if we have them and if people attend, that will bring them more or less at the same place where we're going to be at that stage with humans. But narrative is something that you have to. There's one thing to sort of do the material all in one day versus getting some time to sort of taste it and absorb it on a weekly basis. Think about it and reflect on it and use it in your personal time with God, in your personal Bible study and so on. Yeah. So do that. That's a big tip for you. We do want to see people grow in their faith through this program. It's not just a counseling program. So the material should lead you to that place of recognizing who God is in your life and the story that God wants you to lead in your life. So look for that in your classes. Ask about that in your classes. It's your class, it's your journey. And we have very proficient lecturers in with that. You will not see me much in the class environments, here and there maybe, but I tend to sort of get swamped with all kinds of other managerial things like that. But I want to say you can also come and visit me. We have a coffee and I'll help you understand one or two things. I'm sure that you'll understand everyone here, but if you don't, or if you are upset, let me just say this. If you are upset, don't go away. Don't walk away and decide, you're not going to do this anymore. But remember that a pastoral narrative approach gives room for your story as well as for the person's story next to you. So you will have you will experience contradicting viewpoints in a class environment, obviously. And then it depends on your reaction, but then you should ask, why am I reacting in this way? What discourses are there in my life that I perhaps need to face in this way, that I'm reacting like this? Or a lecturer might say something, or the material that you will be reading might say something. Now, you won't know what it says until you're actually speaking about it in class, and when you give meaning to it in class. Sometimes you're going to read something and say, what is this now? I'm not sure about this. And you can bring that conversation here. Have that conversation here. We don't worship the material, we worship God. Okay, and that's part of the conversation, part of the story that's developing. All right. Okay. Anything else? Will we automatically be accepted to start February if we register this week? Yes, you can still register up to the start of the program during the week of the 7th. And someone said they're from Santon. Santon, is it not closer for you to go to Constantia Crane?
Yeah, I'm just sitting out.
Okay. All right. So there are two campuses, the one in Mossel Bay and the one in Constantia Crane. They are licensed or sort of self-sufficient campuses, which means they follow the same program. We are in conversation with them. They have a little bit more leeway to do things differently in terms of their finances, in terms of the links. They send out the links, we don't send out the links, but we are in constant conversation with them. If you are unsure about anything, if you stay there, then you can just ask us and we can just speak to them or clarify certain things. We have essential, primary, secondary, and additional reading material. Not always. But what I want to say about that is the essential and the primary stuff always stays the same, whether there or here. And then depending on the lecturer even, they might bring material that might be very current now into the curriculum for your classes. And that's them doing a good job besides the primary material. And there might be things that differ there. Can you move from one class to the other? That was, I recall that was some of the questions that we've had in the past. Yes, you can. You can move from one campus also to the other. But remember, your journey mates become your journey mates. and the story is changing when you jump ship. So, and it's going to be a different dynamic. So Puramdale is what Puramdale is in the place that's being lived. And the relationships that govern it at that place. Another question, maybe online there are some questions.
So you said that we have to have an 8% attendance. So will there be a register kept?
Yes, yes. We do keep register. We normally have a register when you visit us in person, and online Zoom gives us this sort of the stats. And we can also ask people to just sign in sort of on Zoom by just writing their name on in the chat function. Is that it? It was so wonderful to see all of you. I hope to see all of you when we start in the week of February, the first week of February. In the meantime, you're welcome to come and visit. And you should have a safe travel tonight, wherever you're going.